Hello, everyone. Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. Today in Bible study, because it was Easter week, we decided to look at one of the other resurrection accounts. And this is something we're going to do today, obviously, and then next week as well. So this is going to kind of be our focus for the next 2 weeks as we look at the similarities and differences between the different gospel accounts of Jesus' resurrection, which I'm pretty excited to do. Now, first thing is we looked at Luke's today because I think on the surface Luke's bears the most similarities to the one that we read from Mark, and so I figured we'd start most similar and then do something different for next week. But firstly, if you open it up and you go to Luke 24 and you read 1 through 12, you're going to see the narrative that we're all very familiar with, right? Women going to the empty tomb. They find the stone rolled away. They go inside. They see two angels this time, right? This is different than Mark, where only one angel is mentioned. And then you have the prediction about Jesus' death, and then told to go to disciples. Now, the cool thing is, and this is the part that sets Mark apart, but also helps us to see where others add more detail. So Luke will go right into, from this point, talking about the narrative after the resurrection. So this is where we get a more full account of what happened afterwards, which Mark lacks, right? Mark ends with the women running away because they're in fear. Of course, there's that longer ending, which is added on, but didn't want to. But that's probably not how the original Gospel of Mark ended. I say probably not because there's debate about it, but I think that it probably didn't end that way, and that other part was added in later. So with that being said, right, the women don't tell anything to anyone because they're afraid. Well, you get to Luke, and the women do tell, but you see how it happens, right? How the disciples react. How do they react? Well, I talked about this on my sermon last Sunday, but they believe that the women are making this up. Right, it says an idle tale. I think that's how the ESV translates it. It's an idle tale, right? It's a fabrication. The women are being hysterical in the very original meaning of that word, and so they don't believe them. Peter does go though, and he does actually see the tomb, but doesn't really know what to make of it. Right, and that's where our reading of this ends. And so we read through that, right? Commented on that, and then we looked at the things that are similar and different. So obviously, there's broad similarities between the two, right? There's different women named. Now Luke doesn't say that these were the ones he named, and nor does Mark say that the ones they named are the only ones who are there. But they give different names. So there's different women who go to the tomb, or different names, although there's some similar too. Then you have angelic beings, right? You have one in Mark, two in Luke. They both find the stone already rolled away. And the message that they're given is similar, but Luke's wording is slightly different. The focus is slightly different. Mark's ends abruptly, and Luke gives the disciples' reaction to the news, whereas Mark cuts that part out. So basically the question is, okay, why are there these differences between the two? And that's a whole conversation, but I would say that these are just different emphases of the same event. We kind of see this in the Gospels, where there will be subtle hints that there are more people there than, for instance, in the Gospel of John, which we're going to look at next week. You'll see there's subtle hints about other people being there, even though no one is named. There's stuff like so it's odd to us because we expect kind of a modern forensic accounting of the resurrection, where they're like, and Mary was wearing blue clothes, and this person was wearing this, and this is that sort of thing, as though it's like a police report. But these Gospels are presented in such a way to highlight certain things. So, I mean, Luke, as far as I remember, is the only one to actually draw attention to the fact that the disciples didn't believe the women because they're women. And that is totally in line with Luke and a lot of his other Gospel, where he really holds up people who are marginalized. And so even here, right, Luke is going to emphasize that they weren't believed, right, because of their gender. And so he is going to make that a part to mention, whereas Matthew and Mark and John are not going to focus as much on that, right? That's kind of one example. And I think sometimes we think that because only one speaker is mentioned or one person is mentioned in the case of the two angels, right, that means only one person is there. I don't think that that's in line with kind of the historiography. Usually these are hyper focused on certain things, and so the fact that Mark only mentions one and Luke mentions two, Mark is focusing on the speaker rather than the fact that there is that there was two of them. That I know that can sound very unsatisfying, and I understand that, but we have to understand that these things are also written in a different culture, time, and place to our own, where their focus was not so much on these small details but a lot on what was being said and to point out certain things. So, for instance, right, just as someone who reads lots of like ancient Greek, or read, not as much anymore, but a lot of ancient Greek histories, you'll notice that in ancient histories they don't focus so much on some of these details. So, like they won't tell you the dates of a battle, for instance. It won't be really important to them, right, on what day such and such a thing happened. But they'll for sure tell you the first person to get who was over the wall, right? Or they won't like describe the strategy in a lot of detail, but they'll record the entire general's speech. Of course, today people will get, oh, that how do we know that they knew these types of things? They'll get very kind of nitpicky about it because it doesn't match kind of the way that we do history today. But this was to show emphasis. So just because some things aren't mentioned doesn't mean that they didn't necessarily happen in the narrative. That's going to become more clear as we kind of see an example from the Gospel of John, which we're going to do next week. So I hope that was interesting to all of you. That's what we talked about. Christ is risen, so I hope you continue to enjoy the spirit of Easter this week. And we are going to have a new thing tomorrow, and then I'll be preaching on Sunday. And we are going to have Bible study next week before I go on vacation, or really on study leave. So we have you still have a little bit more time with me. All right. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Peace out.